Okay, Dennis, talk groove to me, man. Talk groove. Where are we at?
So as I was telling you earlier, I was let me take these out so I don't scream.
Okay.
Yeah, when I moved to New York and I ended up playing 4-piece kits everywhere. At first I was frustrated, but then I figured, let me do more with less.
Yeah.
However, less is more, whatever. However cheesy it sounds, it became kind of survival instinct because, you know, you can learn fancy parts and you have to play it on a 4-piece kit. Suddenly you're like, oh crap, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So then your choices become a little bit more crucial, you know, because you can't, you know, flub your fills or whatever. But also groove-wise, I just started to focus more on groove and less on fills or excuses not to have to worry about the groove, like escapes from the it just became like very basic. Sometimes I wouldn't bring any toms or just a floor tom.
Oh, really? No toms?
Yeah, like when the singer-songwriter, I would bring just snare, kick, floor tom, or I wouldn't bring it, it would be a house kit. And I would be like, you know, forget about the rack tom because, you know, I'm playing brushes or rods or whatever, and I just play one cymbal, hi-hat, you know. But anyway, what I got into and what I realized, especially in New York, doing sessions, what was more useful than anything was having complete control over your feel, because you could play the same groove in a million different ways.
Yeah.
So the most basic groove you could play, and then play it completely straight. Rocket science, you know, especially if you play to a metronome, this is easy because you would play, if you would set your metronome to eighth notes, that's what your eighth notes are like on the metronome. Then, you know, there's a difference between feel and sound, and there's an overlap somewhere. I can play that same groove, laying into the high a little bit more, but still keeping it straight. Necessarily playing louder, I'm just playing the shoulder of the stick instead of the tip, but it immediately gives it more energy. Now the other thing, what I really like, is playing with the quarter notes somewhat accented and the eighth notes pulled back a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Where
nice.
you get sort of a, you're not really noticing that it's not a swing feel or anything, but it instantly has 50% more groove when you play the hi-hat that way. So it's both dynamics and timing that are different. The dynamics are, you know, quarter notes accented, all the ands are pulled back in volume, but they're also pulled back in time a little bit.
Okay.
So that makes it this. Which gives the whole thing, I mean, depending on the tempo, but it really goes for any tempo, gives the whole groove a whole different face. You know, if you combine or compare the two extremes. Second one, I mean, it depends. If you're playing electronic music, sometimes you want it stiff. But that second one is how I naturally tend to play. But you have to be consistent and understand where those ands are, because since they're pulled back a little bit, you want to make sure it fits the music. Of course.
Yeah, it's
nice.
And
you want to make sure the bass player gets it
pulled
too.
back a bit. That's nice.
It has a little bit. It has a little bit more of a sort of a train motion to it, like a little bit less forward motion, but more of a big sound. The other thing is your backbeat. A lot of people are about like laid back, whatever that may be. You know, so a lot of people talk about it, don't really understand what it means. If we had a click, I could demonstrate, but I'll just make it as exaggerated as I can. Even with those dynamics on the hi-hat, I can play the kick and the snare just dead on the beat, which would be. all about context. My point is, knowing when to use what kind of feel. So the next thing I'll do is I'll keep the kick right on the beat. See, the only way you know that you're playing laid back is if something stays on the beat.
Something's
Because you need to have a reference. If
Yeah.
everything is laid back, then you've just shifted everything and it makes no sense.
Sure.
So I'm going to keep the kick straight, and I'm going to put the snare drum as late as I can without actually being late. So I see it as zooming into target, which becomes a bigger and bigger dot, and you're going to be as far in the back of that dot as you could be
Nice.
without being out of it. So that would be something like this. There have been drummers that measured it. I think we're talking like 15 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds, whatever it is. But you can measure it, especially nowadays with Pro Tools and stuff. You can actually look on the grid and you'll see it. And that's really when I started my own recording studio at home, and I started recording to clicks. And
it became a factor.
And I would start, checking out my performance against the grid visually. I would suddenly really see what's going on, because I always kind of knew what it would sound like, but now I could see it, which is a great tool. I mean, I will play and record myself to a click and then look at it and be like, and check how consistent I was, which is a huge tool. So that's.
Do you think there's an area for being liberal with being laid back? How disciplined, as a discipline, do you think it is for you?
It has to be. It's all about the music, though. You have to make sure it fits the music. You can't just have like, okay, whatever song we're doing today, I'm going to play that feel. The song will dictate the feel. You can't dictate the feel. But if you have complete control over it, you can be consistent with it, and you can find the right feel more easily. Or sometimes a song, if you're writing a song, it doesn't have a feel yet. And then you're rehearsing it with a band for hours, and you're like, it just doesn't sound right. And then you suddenly say, well, let me play the hi-hat with a different feel, or let me pull that snare back, or put that snare all the way in front. Because just as I just put that snare drum all the way back, you can also put it all the way in the front, which Stuart Copeland would do a lot.
Yeah.
In general, it's not. It'll be very rare that you want to use that, because in general it has
it's more of a push.
It has an uncomfortable feel. It'll work when you're crashing a cymbal or washing a hi-hat, but when you're keeping a tight hi-hat, generally it just sounds awkward, and it doesn't really work.
If that's the effect you're looking for.
But sometimes, there's plenty of guys that explore it. Like Chris Dave is the extreme example. He'll push stuff and time to places where you didn't know it could go.
He's awesome.
When I first saw him play, I was like, wow.
And that's his thing.
It's a different dimension of like, I can't even keep up. But he has explored that to the point where it's just ridiculous. But it goes to show that there are all kinds of places you can take something that is technically very simple. A lot of people don't think about their time. When they play that groove, they just play any time. Or feel. I mean, they'll play that groove, and they don't really think about, well, where am I putting the snare? Do I play a little bit lazy? Do I put it right on the dot? Is my hi-hat straight, or a little bit of a bounce in it? Or
I see you're using the Peisty JR ride cymbal.
Yes.
Is he an influence on your playing?
Yeah. Obviously a legend. Mostly Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. I mean, that stuff.
Yeah, that was big for me.
Yeah,
that was when I experienced him for the first time,
and
his, made me wake up to that time thing we're talking about.
And the little phrase, the intro to what is it, Rock With You, Rock You, whatever that song is.
Yeah, I think it's Rock With You, is
Rock
it?
With You, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, anyone that played with Michael,
But
you know,
he has that
awesome.
groove that is with the 4 on the floor, with the heel down, the just very relaxed, but just like
present.
just like a freight train, man. It's undeniable, you know, with the Daft Punk stuff he's done too.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
That was great. Yeah, I really appreciated that.
But he has that hi-hat thing. Sometimes he'll keep the hi-hat pretty stiff, but he also has a little bit of a
Texture.
yeah, where that end is just a little bit late, and it just gives it that sort of what do you call it? Sort of the seesaw effect, where it has a little bit of a tick-tock
Yeah, the
idea
shoulder
rather
tip
than
type
just
thing.
straight. Yeah.
Yeah, I really respect that, and it kind of gives the hi-hat, I guess, almost a shaker.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
back and
presence
forth.
in the music. Yeah, but it's still like you played earlier. It's still very nice to play.
Yeah.
Solid eights, and as you say, support the song.
And he's a great influence as far as the whole thing I just explained. Like he has very precise control over that feel.
Yeah, his execution and
Simon
yours
Phillips
is excellent.
One. Simon Phillips is another one who's very aware, and he picks once he picks a feel, he sticks with it incredibly consistently, which is an art, you know. I mean, at the same time, you don't want to overthink anything while you're playing. You want to just play, but when you're feeling the music, you want to make sure you can hold on to that, because as soon as your feel starts to slip, the thing could fall apart, or the groove could be gone. The bass player's going to look around like, what happened, you know. And obviously that's why those are guys that first call guys that everyone wants to play with, because for that reason.
The first time you played with a click or a metronome, how was that?
I've done it from day one.
Excellent.
You know, in the beginning as a kid, the only reason I would play to a click was to develop my double bass skills, which I don't play double bass at all anymore. I mean, I rarely have my double pedal set up. With Bumblefoot, I'll have it set up for some fills, but not really any pattern. Maybe a couple of little things, but no consistent 16s or anything. So that's why I started with practicing to a metronome, and then later on it was just as in studios, you know, and it was never something that I disliked or feared or dreaded. Or actually, to be honest, playing to a metronome to me is almost like cheating in a way. You know, because when you play to a metronome, that means that like 75% of your job is being done by a machine. Because keeping a consistent tempo, that's what I feel like is 75% of our job. You know, you want it's like steering the boat in a straight line, you know. And once you put it on autopilot, all you're doing is just waving at the people, you know.
Following you.
Like, so to me, it's kind of like once you play to a metronome, most of my job is done. Which is maybe the reason I don't necessarily enjoy it, because I feel like it's too easy that way. But sometimes it's necessary, and in the studio it's definitely great, because you can really then focus on feel and you know, form and style, whatever. So in the studio it's nice. Live I prefer to be able to push and pull when needed. You know, one day you play in front of an audience that's really excited, there's a lot of energy and adrenaline in the place, and then when you play to programmed tracks or whatever, it can sometimes feel like I play with one singer, and she'll turn around and tell me to speed up, and I'm like, she doesn't realize I'm playing the tracks. And it's, even though it's her band, she's not really involved with that. She's just singing, you know. So me and the musical director will just be looking at each other like, there's nothing we can do. I'd love to go a little faster too. There's nothing we can do. So those are the moments where you're kind of like, you know. But sometimes you just have to have backing tracks, otherwise you would have
that's being a modern drummer, right?
Yeah, and it's not so much about the drummer, it's about layers of keyboards or like drum loops or something that adds to the music that needs to be there, you know. And the only way to make that happen is to, you know, lock it to a click, and then I play to a click. It's just how it is. Which, I have nothing against that concept, but sometimes it's a bummer when you just kind of want to push it a little bit and you can't.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that's and the more, like I said, the recording at home. That's when it really, when everything is just so apparent. Everything is there visually, and then you start to really master your feel.
What was your first time in studio?
My
Your first experience in
Well,
studio?
that's a difficult question because the moment I started playing drums is also the moment I started recording and engineering.
Right.
Because shortly after my first drum kit, I got a little 16-channel, like a used Yamaha 16-channel mixer with like a bass drum microphone and a snare drum microphone and two cheap overheads, and I would just have like the RCA cables to a cassette deck, and I would dial in the board where I get like nice EQ on everything.
Nice.
And basically from day one, I mean, not day one, but year one for sure, I was recording drums.
Awesome.
So that is just the engineering part of it, as far as understanding mic placement and being aware, because the way you think you sound as you're playing and then the way you actually sound on a recording are, in the beginning, are generally very far apart. Like sometimes you feel like, oh man, it was happening, it sounded great, and then you listen back and you're like, huh, it's not that great.
Yeah.
So over time, the more experience you get and the more recording you do, and also live recordings, even a show, when there's a video of a show, that's a recording to me too. Over time, those two things are going to get closer to each other, where the way it felt as you played and the way it actually sounded are very far apart at first, and they at one point they kind of match each other.
They start to meet.
Yeah, and you realize, I mean, I would say that's probably about 10 years ago where I really reached that point where it's on the recording, it is exactly the way that it felt as I played it. I reached that point about 10 years ago. There'll still be moments where, not so much in the studio, but at shows. Sometimes you'll have a show, a very high energy show with Bumblefoot, for instance, where there's people stage diving and it's mad,
Right.
where you feel like, man, it was a great show and the energy was great and we were on fire. The adrenaline made us play really well. And then you see a YouTube video and you're like, ooh.
The translation is different.
It's a little bit fast. It's a little bit sloppy, but the energy doesn't translate on a YouTube video. So I have peace with it because I know that in the venue at that time, it felt and sounded great and as it should have. So I'm not.
Yeah, that's an interesting
I'm not
observation.
hung up on that anymore at all.
Yeah, a lot of us got caught up with, the last several years of the YouTube, presentation of the drummer.
Yeah.
I know definitely I won't say suffer to that, but now I know things are real time.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Well,
it's okay.
It's not always great, but context is a big deal. A lot of times something is out of context and it doesn't put you in the best light. But at the same time, it also forces you to just be on your game because you just can't
improve.
suck. You can't suck.
Yeah,
you just can't.
It just improves the condition.
20 years ago, if you were playing, you were on tour and like after 3 shows, you're like, tonight I'm just tired, man. I'm just gonna half-ass this show, and who cares?
Right, yeah.
I mean, I've never really done that, to be honest. But 20 years ago, you'd kind of get away with it.
How you feel? That's how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, you'd kind of get away with it, but now you can't because
definitely.
the one show where you kind of half-ass it a little bit is the one show that has all the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
All YouTube videos will be from that show.
That's probably the most fun show as well. Because
Yeah.
you're dialed in, you feel that the onstage sound is fine, you're just playing and going for it. I think I really do appreciate people who produce great videos, and this conversation will go on our Facebook pages, but I think this is an important conversation. That drummers get together, musicians get together, creators get together, and find out how we all started out, find out where we're at now. I mean, we're quite down the road. We're down the road now. You and I are both Peisty artists, and which is just the best experience, the best symbols, and it's a great family to be part of. But everybody else has their story and their journey. They should discuss it and share it. You know?
Yeah.
I think everybody's journey in music and whatever their pursuit, it is important to gauge where you started out, the technology that was around you, and where we are now. Do you think the technology, along with your improved playing, has met now finally? You said earlier.
Yeah, I mean, as we get older and we reach the point where we're actual professionals making a living doing this, you also financially get to a point where you can afford a studio setup and do professional. When you're a 12-year-old kid or a 10-year-old kid, you're not going to have a Pro Tools setup to analyze your playing.
Sure.
But
or the clicks, like we mentioned. And we'll
get
you the play to a click.
I used to have a simple metronome with a dial on it, put my headphones in
I still have it.
I still have it too. No volume on it, so it would be stupid loud. Yeah. But that's what it was. So there are more tools available now physically, but financially a lot of people still can't just get all that stuff.
Well, it's like what you started with, it's back to source. Hi-hat, kick and snare, ride, kick and snare.
I actually started,
keeping time.
I started in marching band.
Okay.
So I started with just a snare drum playing. It's funny, a lot of people laugh, or not laugh, but make fun of how Stuart Copeland plays with the one finger on top.
Yeah, he does.
When I played marching band, that's exactly how we played.
Oh, did you really? Okay.
And I was always having trouble with it, so I would kind of cheat and do this.
Okay.
And
you were actually taught that method?
Yeah, this in marching band, this is how we played. And I always thought it looked silly and I had very little control. Well, we would also be wearing gloves.
Right.
But I would always kind of cheat and do this. Not because I thought it was cool or anything, but just because I would have more control.
It's interesting. You're the first person I've met that was taught called Stuart's method.
This way, with the one finger on top.
Yeah.
It never worked for me, so I would cheat like this.
Okay.
And I'll still play traditional grip a lot, especially if I have to be quieter, because I find it much easier to be quiet when the stick comes down at a bit of an angle.
Okay.
Then, like, you have to really, when I play like this quietly, it's like driving with the brakes on. Like I feel like however hard I try,
it's still going to go
loud.
Okay.
Yeah. And this, I have a lot of control over being very quiet. So singer-songwriter stuff, I'll play most of the time. I'll play like this. I can't really do rim shots, traditional grip. For some reason, I can't be consistent, or I'll hurt my wrist.
Right.
So that's why I don't really ever use traditional grip playing loud. But I'm totally comfortable. It's not like I'm hitting rims when I do fill or anything. I have great aim and I'm comfortable playing.
You started out with trad grip?
Yeah, well, when I played marching band, and obviously that was a snare drum at an angle, and I did that. I think I started that when I was about 7 or 8, and I did that for about 3 years.
Excellent.
And then I went to high school, and then actually I think I quit for about a year, and then I went to high school, and then right around the time I went to high school is when they added MTV to our cable package. We finally caught up from the Stone Age.
Yeah.
So that was like early 90s or something.
It was pretty much the same in Ireland. I used to go to a friend's house to watch it until we got it.
Yeah, so we finally got MTV, and then I saw, I'm talking 91, 92. So this was when, Nirvana, Nevermind, Metallica, Black Album, Chili Peppers,
things
Blood
changed.
Sugar Sex Magic, Alice in Chains, Jar of Flies, Soundgarden, Super Unknown, like all those legendary, amazing albums, Pearl Jam 10, like all the best. I mean, that like 91 through 93
was a great period.
Was
for
the
that
year
genre.
of like incredible concentration of amazing classic albums that all came out all at once.
Yeah,
and that was just such an undeniable, phenomenon.
And all had great drummers.
Oh yeah,
every band you mentioned has.
So
great
MTV
drummers.
was just insane. I was watching MTV all day long, every day.
Yeah.
And this was also when they had the unplugged sessions,
which is my favorite.
Which way
the whole
you saw all those drummers playing like very stripped down, so you could really hear the drums. Really great shots of the drummers, great drum sounds.
Yeah.
You know, really well produced. I mean, when that hit me when I was 12 or 13, it was like, all right, it's done, sold, wrap it up.
Yeah.
You know,
And you could see the drummers then. The videos
Yeah.
that were before were edited, they were on the
Sure.
beach or whatever, and it's, you know, they're
they're
playing to a
music
playback.
videos, yeah, it
Yeah,
was-
there were music videos. So here we encourage the students to watch live.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely, and you can see the setup, you can see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Have you a favorite MTV Unplugged performance?
Nirvana was one of them. I don't know. There was something about. Well, I think my favorite would have to be Pearl Jam.
Same here.
Pearl Jam, Bon Jovi.
Bon Jovi was
Actually,
a good one
Bon Jovi,
too.
I don't
Also,
think
yeah.
was unplugged. I'm not sure that was unplugged. I think it was called An Evening with Bon Jovi.
Yeah, because I think they were the first ones to break the rule. I think
Yeah.
with the MTV Unplugged thing. I think they
But
went
that
electrified. Yeah,
That whole show, I think it was 91 or 92.
that was
It was
awesome.
great. Bird's eye views of Tico the whole time.
Correct,
It was
yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Alanis Morissette was great with Taylor Hawkins. That wasn't even unplugged. That was also, I think it was called MTV Live, where it
Okay.
was just a band.
Yeah, she performed amazingly. My favorite is Pearl Jam, but again, all the ones you mentioned,
Queen's
I
Ride
love
was
them.
great. Alice in Chains was phenomenal.
And it was very influential to me and the guys I was playing with at the time. I were like, wow, because you related to it was a private, intimate gig, and they
Sure.
were the size of the gigs we were doing around Dublin and stuff. You know,
Yeah.
trying to write our own music and as a drummer to hear the drums acoustically like that and
Yeah.
up close, you could actually see what the drummer was doing truly. Instead of a stadium shot or arena.
Yeah.
That was big for me, especially Dave. I can never pronounce his name. And Dave
yeah.
Avabruzzi or
I think it's Abruzzi's.
Abruzzi's, is it?
But I'm
Okay.
not
But I
entirely
was a
sure.
big fan of him.
Yeah, he was one of my heroes. You know, him, I would say Dave Abruzzi's, Nico McBrain was the reason I play Peisty today.
Is that right? Yeah, I
he
think
was-
Nico's great.
He was my hero, and it's funny because I was never really a metalhead. You know, I played in
Yeah.
metal bands, but it's really, when I grew up, I listened to all kinds of music. I
Yeah.
ended up in a metal band, and I kind of stayed in that genre for a while. But as I was doing that, I was still also playing pop and acoustic stuff, and
Sure.
you know, it's some people think I'm a metal drummer, but it's really just, you know, some of the bands I played with
Were metal.
that were bigger happened to be metal bands, but at the
Right.
same time, I was always playing acoustic music.
Have you a favorite style of music that
Um,
you A, like to listen to, B, like to play to? Or are they the
No.
same thing?
No, well, there's definitely a separation between what I like to listen to and what I like to play.
Okay, interesting.
There's definitely music that I love listening to, but that I would never be interested in playing. And then there's music that I enjoy playing that I don't ever listen to, which a lot of people don't understand. But for me,
Okay.
it's kind of, you know, metal would be an example of, and when I say metal, I mean more like hard rock.
Right.
You know,
what was classed as metal is now possibly hard rock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because when, you know, even though I've done sessions in the genres, but like, you know, Meshuggah or just like extreme metal stuff, I have never really have had any interest in playing. Even though I actually have done sessions in
Sure.
that style, because
As a job, yeah.
I would turn it down, people would insist and pay me a lot of money. I'd be like, hey, sure. But
Right.
I've never really enjoyed that at all. But I would listen to that, not so much anymore.
Right, okay.
I enjoy watching crazy metal drummers on YouTube, and I'm just like in disbelief the stuff they can pull off, but I have no interest in ever doing that myself.
Right, right.
You know, there's some obscure crazy jazz stuff that I enjoy listening to or watching that I would never play myself.
Right.
But
Is it a mood thing? Like,
No,
in terms of your listening habits, or what
I think
influenced you
it's-
to listen to something?
yeah, it's interesting because sometimes it kind of sucks being a musician because it's hard to enjoy music because you just automatically analyze it and approach it as a musician rather than just enjoy it, which is why I sometimes enjoy listening music that's very far from what I do.
Right.
because that makes me just kind of disconnect a little more. Um, but I don't know what the question was. Like, I don't know.
What you listen to and what you play.
Yeah, I mean, what
are
I
they separate?
enjoy playing is anything. I like playing honest music, however cheesy that sounds. Um, when I'm playing with people that are trying to be something, I generally it generally creates a vibe um, where it just feels like a job. Like I don't know how to explain. I like
It's
playing.
not pleasant for you,
Yeah,
obviously.
when people are trying to be something that they're not, that they aren't,
Okay.
you know, like pop stars or guitar players or singers that are, or pop stars, like aspiring pop stars.
Sure.
They're trying to be something and force something that's not really what they naturally are, or
Because
where
maybe
they
it's
naturally
popular
come
or
from.
whatever.
Yeah, they're just
Yeah.
they have an idol and they're trying to be that.
Sure.
And then if I get hired by a group like that, then it instantly becomes a job because I'm not really sharing the
The honesty.
the passion and behind it, because it's not like five guys in a room or a girl or
Yeah.
whatever. Where there's that passion of music working towards a goal and interacting and stuff. It's like we're trying to create something that I have no problems recreating, and that's my job.
Right.
You know, so I enjoy many styles of music. And even if it's like a situation where it's not necessarily the most honest music in the world, I'm still playing drums, so I'm still having a good time. But I have the best time when it's a bunch of guys in a room creating music that is just a pure reflection of our personalities, where we're all on the same page, where it just happens, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be an existing band where I'm playing existing music that just happens to really work. You know, it could be all different guys that are on the recording, or were in the band previously.
Right.
But we just have this thing, you know.
Communication.
Yeah, where it just works, you know.
So passion's while you're a professional, the
I still-
passion,
yeah.
you like the passion to be there.
Well, I mean,
if
I never
possible.
started playing drums because I was like, I want to be rich and famous, so I'm gonna play the drums.
Yeah.
That's
I
probably
don't
the
know
worst
if-
decision
Yeah,
that
I
you can ever
don't
make.
know many drummers that I respect that really
Yeah,
think that way.
I just
honestly.
love playing the drums, so that's
yeah.
why I started it, and I'm fortunate that I'm making a living doing it. You know, it was really a matter of, you know, reaching that sort of crossroads where it was like, well, I need to make a living, but I really don't want to do anything other than playing drums. So
Right.
either drums are going to be my hobby that I'm going to do every free minute I have, but I'm going to have to get a job,
Okay.
or I'm going to try to make a living playing drums.
Yeah,
And
I don't
that-
think
and-
we can tell people how to do it, but what would, because my journey's different than yours, and yours is unique to you, but somebody's out there and they're going to see this, and they're going to know what they're putting in to their drummer music career right now. What do you think are the attributes in the state of play today, modern society, the way
Well,
the music business is?
It's very.
How
I
do you
mean,
transfer over to being a pro?
today is 180 degrees different from when I started, and it's not like
too.
I'm the wise old guy, because I'm still pretty young, but just in the past 10 years alone, so much has changed, which is pretty dramatic. But in essence, you know, the first few things that you're going to need to be able to be a professional drummer, you know, those things will always be the same. You need to be, believe it or not, being an easygoing, fun person to be around is the number one thing. Because if you line up 10 drummers and half of them are phenomenal drummers, like, you know, insane chops, maybe even for a gig where you're not required to play crazy chops, but
Sure.
you know, perfect playing, like couldn't be better. But he's kind of a arrogant, you know,
Right.
unpleasant person. And then there's the drummer that or who can keep up, good enough. He's not phenomenal, but he's good. But he's just, you know, a ton of fun to be around. You know, he just makes everyone feel better. Just look forward to hanging out with him again. That's the guy that's going to get the gig.
Right.
Because if you have to be on a tour bus with somebody or in a recording studio for 20 hours a day, you know, who do you want to be in the tour bus with? You know?
Yeah.
So, because a lot of people don't realize that, and a lot of times when a band gets a new drummer or a new guitar player or whatever, famous bands, a lot of times people are like, yeah, but why did they pick him? There are so many drummers that are so much better than that guy. I'm really disappointed they chose him. It's like they chose him because he's a really cool guy to hang out with. And they're having a great time on the bus, not fighting, not being annoyed. You know, they get along. It's a good time. Because an audience sees 2 hours of the band.
Yeah, the presentation.
The other 22 hours, they're packed in a bus or whatever.
Yeah, it's family for that period of time.
So,
you're right, yeah. It's
so
a good
basically
point.
the attributes you were talking about, being just an easygoing person, checking your ego at the door, you know, just, you know, and I'll be the first to admit that when I was younger, I did not understand that concept. I was only worried about my playing, and I was very impatient, and I would, you know, get on people's case if they weren't prepared as much as I thought they should have been.
Right.
Whether it's my band or someone else's band. Like, you know, I pissed people off.
Right.
But at one point, especially after moving to New York, when I really started to understand the industry, I started to really understand how things work, and that's when I just really...
So knowledge of the industry and its inner workings
and I
has
know
helped
now,
you.
too, that when I go to an audition for a gig, or get an inquiry for sessions, that they talk to other drummers, and I have to be the guy that makes them feel good about working with them. Not so my playing, you know, the reason that they approach me in the first place is because they already know that I would be able to deliver the drums for that. That's not really the issue. It's, you know, you're on the phone with each other, and how does that make them feel? That's a really important thing. The other thing is, too, that you have to be prepared and willing to have a very inconsistent income. And if you want to always have a consistent income and purchase all the things you need in life, and then you should get an office job. Because, as you know, 1 year we're doing great. We're going on vacation 4 times a year, and you know, we're buying our wives beautiful things, and the next year it's like, man, I could really use another student. You know? If that's something that you can't deal with, you know, the music industry is not for you.
It's very organic, you know, and it shifts.
And I enjoy it, to be honest, because I can't, like when something is too consistent and predictable, I get bored really fast.
Really?
I lose interest really fast, not in little things, but in life. You know, I need new stuff around me. I can't do a 9-to-5 job. If I have a week where I wake up at the same time every day and I go do the same thing every day, I mean,
it's not for you.
A week is you know, after 2 days I'm already going stir crazy. So I like when it's all over the place, unpredictable, traveling all the time.
You're inspired by that.
Juggling different things, you know, having 10 voicemails that I need to listen and call people back, and it just the craziness of it, and then 2 days later, nothing. Just sitting on the couch with my cat and like nothing to do, nothing planned.
Now, when you're sitting there on downtime, are you able to relax, or are you still thinking about projects? Or?
No, I've learned to relax.
I think we're all starting to do that because
get a little bit older, and you
there's a lot of stuff we're not in control of, you know.
Yeah.
But we went to Dales today, and we were checking out their products there and Peisty line, and we discussed, you know, being signed to Peisty, and you, of course, have been to the factory. Yeah. So I would consider that a game changer. I'm hoping to go pretty soon as well. Is that a game changer? What are your game changers in this business?
Well, I mean, going to the factory wasn't necessarily a game changer, but it was definitely one of those bucket list things. As I was explaining, you know, I was a big fan of Nico McBrain, and you know, and also to kind of explain my Nico McBrain thing, I was never really into the kind of metal that's like really straight. Like,
Okay.
I was never into Judas Priest much. I was never into the very straight metal.
Right.
I was very into Black Sabbath, and I was very into Iron Maiden.
Okay.
And now that I am more educated and I know what's up, I realize that that's because they play with a very specific feel. A lot of swing feel, a lot of blues background. Nico played with Pat Travers before Maiden, so he has a blues background. That's now I realize that's why I like those drummers, because they didn't play straight with the 16s on the bass drums. There are really no double bass drummers that I appreciated. I loved listening to Dave Lombardo just because of the sheer brutality of what he was doing.
Yeah, he's great.
But it's not like, oh, I'm going to put on some Slayer. And,
or I want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate it, but it wasn't listening music for me, really.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, Nico had that instructional video, Rhythm of the Beast.
Yeah, it's great.
And he has that. It's on YouTube now. If you type in vintage Peisty, you'll see 5 or 6 part. They cut it up in parts of him at the factory.
I have it on VHS somewhere.
And I remember seeing that when I was 12 or 13, thinking, wow, that is the holy place.
Yeah.
And now being an endorser, I played Peisty all my life. I made a little side street mistake,
sure,
quote unquote. I got a deal thrown in my lap that I took, and then realized that I'm really a Peisty guy. So and then Peisty signed me, luckily. But I was only with Peisty for about a year and a half, 2 years. Talked to Christian in Switzerland, and he was super cool.
He's
I'm sure
great.
you know Christian, and
he's great.
Yeah, I went there. I drove with my wife. We rented a car, Amsterdam, Paris, Lucerne,
nice,
Knoxville, and had a blast. Hung out there all day, and hammered my own cymbal, and it's all crooked and sounds like crap. But
hammered your own cymbal. I mean, that's got to be a trip, right? Being a fan.
The cool thing is the factory. If you've seen that Nico McBrain video, the factory is still identical. Like they changed the decor maybe a little bit.
Right.
The coloring of the cubicles where they do the hammering.
Yeah.
They used to be in the videos. I think there's foam in the walls.
Okay.
Now it's painted or like it changes.
Subtle changes.
Subtle changes, but as soon as you walk in, you're like, wow, I just walked into that video. It's a trip.
That's awesome. Yeah, that must have been a great experience.
That's a VHS tape that I would just watch 20 times a day for years.
Yeah, and he's a great guy. He's a funny guy. Like you said earlier, he's a very... I spent time with him in England.
A couple times hanging out with him. Yeah,
he's a very funny guy, and very humble, and of course talented. I mean, they've had a great life cycle. They're still going. I think they're important in the timeline of music.
Sure.
I always enjoyed the sound. I always enjoyed his ride. His ride cymbal playing and his sound.
Yeah, his 22-inch Sound Creation Bell ride.
Yeah,
is the single #1 ride.
You have one, right?
No, I have his current one.
Right, the current.
But the Sound Creation one that he had in the early '80s, that is the holy grail of ride cymbals for me. And every now and then one will pop up on eBay for $800, and it's like, I want it, but
It's
one
a
day
shame they still
one.
don't make it because, you could just call the guys. But it's, Peisty's a family. They make everything. Even as Vinny said, they just make everything easy.
Here's Vinny's Crash and Hats.
Yeah,
which are some of my favorite cymbals.
Yeah, let's hear them.
This is the 20-inch.
These are the 602s,
right?
right?
I don't know how the microphone translates, but this is the 20-inch Modern Essentials Crash. These are the 15-inch hats. Store worth of Peisties at home, but this is kind of if I sit down at home to just practice or jam by myself, woodshed. This is the setup I tend to use because